Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And I want to thank you for joining me for today's Simpletivity webinar. Today's live event is all about how we can get more out of our day. How can we get more done, be more productive, yet feel less stress as a part of our day? Can we actually do both at the same time? And my answer to you is a resounding yes. In fact, I think there's a bit of a cyclical relationship between these two. When we are more productive, when we are feeling more effective and more efficient, that often reduces the amount of stress that we feel on a day-to-day basis. And in return, when we are feeling less stress as a part of our day, we are able to be that much more productive. We're able to be that much more efficient with our work, or maybe just our daily lives. So thank you again for taking time out of your day to join me for today's webinar. We will be keeping things just under an hour, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you. If you haven't had an opportunity to introduce yourself in the live chat, I'd encourage you to do so. I'm looking forward to your comments and your questions, and we'll be reserving time to answer those as a part of today's session. My name is Scott Friesen, and I refer to myself as a busyness killer. Now, some of you are probably asking, what on earth is a busyness killer? Well, I feel that there is a distinct difference between being busy and being productive. And I'm sure that you've heard many people use those words, use those terms synonymously. Perhaps you've even been guilty of doing this yourself. We say to ourselves, oh, if I'm having a busy day, I must be having a productive day as well. And I'm here to tell you, no, that is not true. That is incorrect. There is a big difference between just being busy and being productive. Or as I like to say, any fool can be busy. You don't need an education. You don't need any experience to be a busy individual. Work at your productive best. If you want to perform at your very best, you need to set aside a few good routines, have a certain amount of discipline, not a whole lot of willpower, not a whole lot of discipline, but you need to follow a few simple things so that you can actually work at your very best. As a busyness killer, I am also the founder of Simpletivity Training and Consulting, and I help both individuals and organizations to get more done, to be more productive, and enjoy less stress. And I sort of proudly state that I'm not a business coach and I am not a life coach. Nothing against individuals that have those titles, but I focus exclusively on time management and personal productivity. So what are we going to focus on today? Well, I want to show you how to identify your most important work. I haven't met too many people that don't have a full plate already, right? They have so many things that they're trying to juggle, so many things that they'd like to get done. How do we identify our most important work? I want to show you a few different techniques on how you can achieve that so you can feel confident that you're working on the right thing at the right time. I want to show you why you shouldn't try to complete everything. That should not be your end goal, but rather be specific with what you are trying to accomplish and be comfortable, be confident in saying no to other things that are going to be distractions or just get in your way of having your most productive day. I want to show you how to stay focused and reduce distractions. We live in a world where it's so easy for us to be pulled away from our number one priority. It's so easy for us to be distracted by notifications or other forms of technology. How can we stay laser sharp with our focus? And I also want to share with you one of my favorite applications, one app that just might make email so much simpler and so much easier for you. So this is an app I've been using for over a year now. I honestly can't think of dealing with email without this one particular app. I'm going to show you how it works and how it might actually boost your productivity, allow you to spend less time in your inbox if you choose to use it yourself. As always, I look forward to your questions and comments. I would encourage you to use the live chat window here on YouTube. If you're watching today's webinar on a desktop system, the live chat should be to the right of the video player. If you happen to be watching on your mobile device, you can hop into the chat, usually on the bottom portion of your screen. And you can also use social media. You can use Twitter if you like. Just use the hashtag #StopTheBusy, and I'll be looking for other follow-up questions on Twitter after today's live cast. But let's start with you. Let's actually start with a few questions and comments. I'd like to know, what are you hoping to get out of today's webinar? What's the primary reason that you decided to click on today's live stream or register for today's webinar? What's the number one thing, or maybe the top two things, that you are hoping to get out of today's webinar? So I'll give you a moment to use the chat window. While we're waiting, a hello to a few other people who have joined us. We've got friends from Northern California. We've got friends from Southern California as well. I think I've already mentioned some of our earlier friends from Greece, from Hawaii, Canada, Croatia. It's always great to hear where everyone is calling in from or viewing today's webcast. I've yet to have someone call in from Antarctica, but usually we get most of the other continents represented here. Crystal asks a question, or a question comment. Have you ever used a bullet journal? I was thinking of starting one, but my handwriting is really bad. I've got actually a great video from a good friend of mine, Francesco D'Alessio, who also has a channel here on YouTube. He did a great guest post for me not too long ago about the bullet journal. So I might encourage you to see his take on the bullet journal and get some feedback there. Some of the other comments here. Rhonda says, looking for a recap. Always good to listen again. Rhonda, I'm glad that you can join me again and one last time, since I've decided to retire this particular webinar. Carolyn says, help processing email inbox. That's great. Stay tuned. Near the end of today's session, the last 5-10 minutes or so, we're going to be focusing on email and showing you that one app I was telling you about. Kirsten says, I'll be in Antarctica next month. That's fantastic. Kirsten, I believe you're calling from or viewing from Hawaii today. So that's sort of a different extreme there of those two parts of the planet. I hope to learn ways on how to prioritize different tasks. You are in the right place. We're going to take a deep dive on that. Nanad says, one new useful tip. Already got some from you, so I thought worth checking this last webinar. Thanks so much, Nada. I'm glad that you enjoy the content here on Simpletivity or on simpletivity.com. And you know what? That's really my ask for all of you. It's never my expectation as a trainer, as someone who facilitates a lot of workshops, that you walk away with everything that I deliver. If you can walk away with something, one, maybe two things that make sense to you, that is going to help you be more productive, I think that's success. So looking forward to sharing something powerful with you. Rudolph says, how can I stay focused? And Brian says, I'm looking to refine my GTD system. Those of you who may not be familiar with that acronym, stands for Getting Things Done, which is a really great framework, for a lot of things when it comes to productivity and personal time management. So I'll definitely have a few tips there for you, Brian, that are related to the GTD system as well. So keep your questions, keep your comments coming throughout today's session. I am going to reserve some time to answer them, and I will also reserve time at the end of today's session to answer as many of those questions as I can as well. So when I meet someone for the very first time, I usually ask them the following question. Hey, how are things going at work? And without fail, the number one response I receive is this one. Scott, I'm just so busy. Scott, you would not believe how busy I am. I am up to my eyeballs in email. I think I've got 762 unread emails in my inbox right now. I've got a to-do list, which is like a mile long. It just seems to be never-ending, task after task after project after project. Scott, my schedule is jam-packed. I've got meetings that are back to back to back to back. And that's just my morning tomorrow. I've got all these projects that I'm involved in. I'm involved in this committee over here. I'm volunteering on this stuff on the side. And then I've got all this other work off the side of my desk. And it's that last statement that always catches my ear: side of my desk, or work off the side of my desk. Some of us must have a pretty humongous desk for all of this work that we're engaged in, which is not our primary focus, right? It is not our number one goal. It's all this other stuff that we'd like to do. Well, there's something else that is catching my attention more and more often, and that is that it seems that many of us are starting to boast about how busy we are. Let me ask you this. Have you ever had someone complain to you about how busy their life is for 15 minutes? They are so busy, but they seem to have plenty of time to tell you all about it. I sometimes refer to this as the cult of busyness, or perhaps the trap of busyness. And I think we should be ashamed of ourselves to try and one-up one another with how busy our lives are. I don't want you to be busy. You heard me say it at the top of today's live cast. I want you to be productive. So let's take a look at how we can do that. In order for you to have your most productive day, productive week, productive month, or productive year, I think you need to accept two simple facts. And these are those two facts. Number one, you will never, ever complete everything you want to do. And I'm here to tell you that that's okay. In fact, that is a secret to getting more out of your career, out of your life, out of your time with your family or other loved ones. You will never complete everything you want to do. I also want you to accept this second fact, that right now, or at any given point in time, something is more important than everything else. I think it's important for you and I to accept these two facts as we start our days, as we look at our calendars, as we interact with our email or text messages or Slack or whatever other forms of communication that we may be using. I think we need to accept these two particular facts. So let's go into them in a bit of a deeper dive. What do I mean exactly by these two facts, and how does it apply to our day? So the first one is, you will never complete everything that you want to do. Studies suggest that we have, on average, 50 to 60,000 different thoughts each and every day. Think about that for a second. Add one more thought to that. 50 to 60,000 different thoughts each and every day. Now, not every one is an idea, not every one is a task or a project, but an awful lot of them are, right? We have an awful lot of new ideas minute by minute, hour by hour as the day progresses. I mean, you're a creative individual. You're an innovative individual, regardless of what your title is, regardless of what your industry is, regardless if you're a business owner or a solopreneur, or perhaps you work for a large organization. You are creative, you are innovative, and your mind is coming up with new ways to solve problems. But here's the thing, you will never complete, and that's okay. Sometimes we use terms like a bucket list, right? These are the 100 things I'd like to do, before I die, or in the next 20 years, or something like that. That's a little bit different than completing absolutely everything, because often that new idea, that idea that pops into your head, isn't such a great idea. In fact, it might not even be a good idea. We may have thought it's a good idea at the time, but it doesn't mean that we should complete it or pursue it or bring it to fruition. You will never complete everything that you want to do. When we try to complete everything on our to-do list, when we try to tackle all 27 or 38 things on our to-do list for today or this week, it often causes a lot of distractions. I mean, think about the last time that you went and reviewed your to-do list, especially if it's a lengthy to-do list. Your eyes probably wander. They probably scanned up and down and back and forth. And even if you engaged in one of those tasks, when it was finished and you came back to that to-do list, again, there was probably an awful lot of distractions. Oh, I still got all this to do. After I don't know, maybe I should just jump down and do that thing now, and then I'm going to come back up here. But then, I don't think I'm going to have enough time because I've got that meeting coming up. We get distracted by everything that is on our plate. And these distractions often lead to poor results, right? We often start to cut corners a little bit with some of these tasks, not just deferring them. I'm not just talking about deferring things day after day, which also adds to our stress levels, but we start to cut corners a little bit, which leads to poor results. And if we spend too much time with lesser important tasks, things that maybe aren't due today, or maybe we shouldn't even be engaging in them at all, that distracts us from our more important work or our more valuable work. And when we deliver poor results, or when we know that we're not really giving it our best, or we're not delivering the best output, well, this often leads to increased stress. When it feels like we're just treading water, that we're just barely getting by, this often leads to a large amount of increased stress, or worry, or possibly even depression as a part of our day. So I'm here to tell you, stop trying to get everything done. I didn't say stop trying. I want you to try, but stop trying to get absolutely everything done. You probably don't need to get everything accomplished that is looking at you or staring back at you at your to-do list right now. Focus on what you can handle. Focus on getting the right things done. Often when it comes to the subject of time management or productivity, we've even talked about it earlier today. One of the most famous books by author David Allen is Getting Things Done. And people are often gravitated towards those types of books and those types of methodologies. Well, I want to get more done in less time. I want to get more out of my day and then have more discretionary time or more time away from work. It's not always about getting more done. It's about getting the right things done. And you are going to see greater success in your career, in your daily life. You are going to be more happier if you can focus on getting the right things done and being able to filter out those things that are less important. So how do you focus on the right things? How do you avoid some of these distractions that seem to permeate and bubble up as part of your day-to-day work? Well, my solution might surprise you just a little bit. Here it is. I suggest and highly recommend that you keep your notes and your tasks separate. They are not the same things, and they shouldn't be mixed together. I believe notes and tasks are a lot like oil and water, right? You know what happens when you try to mix oil and water, they're going to separate in the glass, right? The same thing should be the case with your notes and tasks. Just because you thought of it, right? Just because it popped up into your head doesn't mean that you should necessarily pursue it, that you should go about and delay other things on your task list and start with that idea. Keep your notes. Those are your ideas, whether it's notes from a meeting, things that pop into your head, that short conversation that you had with a colleague in the hallway. Keep your notes and your actual tasks in a separate place. I encourage that you select and make use of an effective capturing tool. One tool, one single centralized tool that you can use to capture all of those ideas, possibly interruptions. Think about how many times someone may interrupt you at your desk, especially if you work in an office, especially if you work in an open office where it's so easy to interrupt someone else. Can you capture that note? Can you capture that idea so that you can go back to your focused work? You can go back to where you should be putting your attention. Now, if you haven't heard of this term before, a capturing tool, here's my simple definition of what a capturing tool is, or at least what an effective capturing tool is. So number one, it's a place to store new ideas or notes or requests, little things that pop up and come to you throughout the day. It might even be something that you think of in the shower or on your drive home from work, or if you take transit, a bus or a train from or to the office. When these thoughts come to you, don't let them just sit there in your head. That's often the source of our biggest distractions, are just leaving these things in our mind. We want to capture them, but not all of them. In fact, I would argue the majority of them are not tasks, or at least they're not tasks yet. So let's just capture them in this singular, centralized capturing tool. Number two, it should be an object that is physically with you 95% of the time. I realize that's a pretty high percentage, right? That's most of your day. And I mean 95% of your waking hours. Well, you could probably think of a device that is right now in your pocket or in your purse or backpack, or maybe it's just laying there on the desk, that is probably with you 95% of the time. However, it does not need to be a digital tool. It does not have to be your smartphone. Thirdly, can it be accessed and reviewed with ease? And this really comes down to personal preference, right? What is something that you can take out that is with you, and you can quickly add that note, capture that idea, and then put it away so you can get back to your email, or you can get back to that important conversation that you're having with a customer. Same with reviewing it. What is something that you can quickly access and say, what was said in that meeting yesterday? Or, I had that great idea yesterday morning. What was it again? Can you review it? Can you retrieve it with ease? Now, the only real question, the hard question you need to make to start off with selecting your capturing tool is it going to be digital, or is it going to be analog? We had a great question at the start of today's live cast asking about a bullet journal, which is an analog method. It's using a notebook or a moleskin notebook to capture not only your tasks, but your notes, ideas, organizing much of your life, both your professional life and or your personal life. But again, this comes down to personal preference. You may have already found a digital tool. You may have already found an app that you like to use, and that's going to be your primary use for capturing new notes and ideas. But again, just because there are many great tools out there, it doesn't mean that you have to select something from the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store. Possibly, you may want to even experiment with something that you are not currently using. Therefore, I see a lot of people actually transitioning, or at least experimenting with the bullet journal or experimenting with a notebook, just because they find it's that much easier to grab some of that information. Now, if you do decide to use a digital tool, two of my note app recommendations. Number one is Evernote. Evernote's been around for many years, one of the first really big players in the note-taking app space. They sort of introduced the idea of a cloud-based note-taking app. Cloud-based meaning that you can access that information on any other device. Of course, now we take that for granted. We just expect everything to be cloud-based, so we expect to be able to access it on our Apple Watches, on our smartphones, on our tablets, on our desktop or laptop computers. Evernote has many, many different features. It certainly has evolved over the years and can be a great tool for capturing those ideas. Another recommendation I have is to use Google Keep. Now, this is Google's take on a note-taking app. It is a much more simplified version. In fact, it doesn't have many of the features that Evernote has, very stripped down in comparison. But in many ways, that actually might be an advantage, depending on what you are trying to accomplish. Personally, I feel that Google Keep is a quicker solution because it doesn't have as much baggage. It doesn't have as many features, as many other things attached to it. But again, it really depends on what you are trying to get out of it, the types of notes that you are taking, the length of notes that you are taking, and perhaps how you wish to categorize and and label those notes within your application. Of course, these are not the only two available to you. You may have already found something that works for you, but if you are new to note-taking apps, these would be two really good places to start. You may even want to download both of them, try them both out simultaneously at the same time, and see which ones you prefer. So remember this, you will never complete everything that you want to do, and that shouldn't be your goal. No one has ever gotten to the end of their life and said, I did it all. I got it all done. I'm just wasting time here. I've done absolutely everything. No, you're always going to have another great idea, another really good idea. It doesn't mean that you need to follow or try to accomplish them all. Make a clear distinction between those good ideas and what you are actually going to do. I have a lot of good ideas throughout the day and throughout the week, and sometimes those distract me from my great ideas or my number one goals. I'm sure the same thing happens to you as well. So make that distinction between ideas or just good ideas and what you are actually going to pursue. So I want to take a brief pause here and ask you a question. What are your thoughts on note-taking apps? What are your thoughts on keeping that separation between your notes and your ideas and your tasks? Or what other questions do you have so far? Anything related to productivity or anything that I've discussed this far in the webinar? Got a question or a comment here from Rudolph. He says, what about OneNote? So Microsoft OneNote is another excellent tool. I would certainly sort of throw it in the mix here. It's been around a very long time and has certainly evolved as well. If you already use the Microsoft infrastructure, if you're already using Outlook or Word, Excel as a part of your day-to-day, you might see some really great advantages with using OneNote. And in fact, the app versions, the mobile versions of OneNote, have really come a long way in the last 2 years as well. So OneNote, a very powerful note-taking application. Great suggestion there from Rudolph. Any other questions that you have so far? Again, I'd encourage you to include them or write them in the chat window. Kirsten says, can you give the one-sentence definition of what you call a task and what you call a note? That is a great question, Kirsten. And I often use the word task and to-do synonymously, and I think most of us do. Task and to-do, I would say, are the same thing, but I would say a note is different. My definition would be this, is that a to-do or a task is something that I've agreed to or committed to pursuing. It's something that I have said, yes, I need to do that, or that's worthy of my time, it's worthy of my energy, I am going to accomplish that. And the reason I say that, and the reason why I make this distinction between notes and tasks, is I think too often when we keep all of them together in the same area, they're often just an idea, right? They're half-baked, they're partially spawned. I'm sure I could use some much better terminology there, but it's something that came to you, or maybe it was just a suggestion from someone else on your team, or even a manager sometime. It's just a suggestion. Doesn't necessarily mean that you need to pursue it. So I think in some cases we need to hold back, or we need to decide. We need to have a routine where we go back, review our notes, and say, okay, the notes I took today, these 2 or 3 things, I'm actually going to do them tomorrow, or I'm actually going to pursue them next week. But not everything that you write down, not everything that comes to mind, I think should be pursued. I hope that answers your question. Thanks, Kirsten. Brian says, love Evernote. Use it in combination with Todoist for personal tasks. Yeah, some great leverage there between a combination of tools. Brian says, for work, I use G Suite and Asana. I'm a bit worried about having too many different apps, but they seem to be the best for different reasons. And that's something that can really plague a lot of us, is using too many different apps. I know some people think, well, I'm being more efficient if I keep my my notes, my calendar, my tasks, my email. Like if I keep them all in the same place, I'm being more efficient, right? I don't have to open up multiple applications. And there certainly can be some benefits by taking that approach. However, sometimes it can also cause distractions, right? If you have too many things together, you're seeing pieces of information, you're seeing other parts of your work or other parts of your day when you want to be focused on this area. So yeah, sometimes having that separation can be a good thing. Nanad says, on capturing device, we can improve our productivity in capturing ideas, notes, etc., and end up with waste amount of information to process later. Any tips on that? So Nanad, if you are, if you're familiar, with the idea of a mind dump or a mind sweep, right? Of clearing things out of your mind, trying to keep your mind clear so that you can focus on your work for the day or what you want to focus on in the moment. That often does lead to a lot of notes, right? Like a lot of information that you're either scribbling down in a notebook or you're capturing in a note-taking app. My best piece of advice would be to set a schedule or a regular routine for you to review those notes. So for example, I typically do this as a part of my end of day routine, is where I'll go back, I'll take a look at all the notes that I've written down in the last, 8 to 10 hours, and then decide like, okay, that's something I want to come back to later. That's something I want to do. That's going to be a to-do for tomorrow, or that's going to be a to-do for next week. And then often I find that there's, in many cases, as much as 50% of it is just discarded, right? It's things that I thought might have been valuable, but you know what? That's actually going to take me off course, or that's going to add more scope creep to the project that I'm currently engaged with. So I often recommend take a few minutes each day to review your notes, rather than get to the end of the week or get to the end of a few weeks and you just have a vast amount of notes. And often we just either say we're going to start over again, or we feel that it's a pointless exercise. So thank you so much for the questions. Please keep them coming. I will be reserving some more time later on to answer your questions as well. So the second fact that you may remember that I want you to accept is that right now, something is more important than everything else. And I sure hope that right now that something is this webinar, is your involvement in today's live cast. But it really doesn't matter what time of day, it doesn't matter what time of the week, it doesn't matter if you're engaged in work or not, at any given point in time, something important than everything else. And I find that I have to remind people time and time again that nothing is exactly equal. As a part of my role as a productivity expert, I help people with their own to-do lists and their own project lists and so forth. And I'm sometimes amazed at how often I see people will have, 5 high priority issues, right? They'll have 7 super critical issues, and then they've got a few less critical, and then they've got some medium issues and so forth. You know what? It's really impossible for you to have 5 high priority items. One of those 5 is going to be a higher priority or more important than everything else. I don't care what they are. I don't care what the issues are or what the problem is. No two things are ever exactly equal. And so I think our to-do lists, I think the work that we're trying to pursue should represent that. We need to remind ourselves from time to time. So how do we do it? How do we identify our most important work? Well, I think if you want to get great answers, you need to ask yourself some pretty great questions. Sometimes they're more challenging than others, but I think sometimes we have to almost play a game with ourselves, ask ourselves a few tough questions or ask ourselves a few thought-provoking questions so that we can highlight or we can identify our most important work. So here's an example, I feel, of a good question. And you've probably heard something like this before. If I can only accomplish one thing tomorrow, what should it be? Think about the last time you went on an extended vacation. Think about the last time that you were going to be away from your office or that people wouldn't be able to communicate with you for several days. Isn't it amazing that when it came to your last day of work, before you left, before you went on holiday or took that vacation, things really got crystal clear. All of a sudden you could clearly see what really needs to get done and what can I defer until I return, or what can I defer to someone else or delegate to someone else? What is maybe not even worth pursuing at all? When it comes down to those time crunch moments, things get really, really clear. Well, it can be tough to put ourselves in that situation on a regular basis, but asking a question such as this, if I can only accomplish one thing tomorrow, what should it be, right? If you had to put all your chips on just one to do, which one should it be? This can help you narrow your focus when it comes to pursuing your to-do list. But there's a better question, and I would call it a great question. And it comes from the book, The One Thing by Gary Keller. And I've modified it here just slightly because I believe it reads a little bit easier here. But essentially, the question is this: thing I can do that will make everything else easier or unnecessary. And yeah, it's those last two words that are really the goal. They're really the catalyst in this question. What's one thing that you can do that will make everything else easier or unnecessary? The reason that I like this question so much is because if you can answer this honestly, right? If you can honestly answer this question when it comes to all of your tasks or all of your commitments, you're going to find the number one task. You're going to rather quickly, identify what you should be working on next. Because if that thing is going to make everything else easier, if that's going to make the rest of your day easier, if that's going to make your weekend that's coming up that much more enjoyable, if that's actually going to cancel out some other things on your to-do list or cancel out maybe a few things on your calendar, well, that's probably where you should be focusing your attention. So this is a question that I ask myself on a fairly regular basis. I ask it as I prepare my to-do list for the day before, sometimes even in the middle of the day when I've got a few different directions I could be going in. I'll ask myself, well, what's going to make everything else easier or unnecessary? And when those words stick in my mind, often it is very quickly revealed to me what I should be focusing my attention on. Now, another thing that I would suggest as you are planning out your day, as you're trying to identify your most important work, is that I strongly encourage you to select two things the day before. And you may be familiar with this if you have learned or if you have received your copy of the to-do list method, a very simple guide to making your to-do list that much more efficient, that much more streamlined. The third step in the to-do list method is to select two things the day before, your two most important tasks to complete in the following day. And the reason why I encourage people to do this the day before is that I find it gives us a bit of a higher level perspective when it comes to tackling our day. Some of you may be in the habit of starting your day with a to-do list. And I'll tell you right now, that is much better than not preparing or not planning at all. But I find sometimes it can be difficult to get that perspective of the entire day or that perspective of all the projects that are on your plate when you're trying to configure or you're trying to edit your to-do list and then you're just about to jump into a meeting or you're expecting the phone to ring at any moment. One of the advantages of planning out your to-do list the night before, or perhaps as a routine to end your workday the day before, is that it gives you a bit of distance, right? It gives you several hours before you actually approach that day. And that can often give you that needed perspective as you tackle your to-do list. The other reason why I encourage this is that I find that many people see success in starting their day by doing. And in most cases, I would much rather that you begin your day by executing on your goals or executing on your to-do list rather than thinking about your to-do list, right? I would rather you start your day doing than thinking of doing. So this can be a great way to just highlight those two things that you are going to try and accomplish before everything else. Don't waste your time stack ranking every single item. Don't waste your time with 3 or 4 or 5 different colors or emojis or flags or whatever you're using. Just be really clear on the two things that you're going to tackle before anything else. And when I say anything else, I really do mean anything else. Yes, I even mean complete these tasks before email. In my honest opinion, even though we've come so far when it comes to communication and communication technology, I find that email continues to be the number one time suck for most people. Maybe you don't fall into this camp, but as I have worked with thousands of different individuals and organizations around the world, I find that time and time again, people have an issue. People seem to be swamped with email. My encouragement for you is to accomplish those two most important tasks before you get sucked into email, because there are few things that will distract you more than your inbox. Did you know that we spend an average of 6.3 hours a day dealing with email? Yes. Now, these numbers are specific to North America, that the average professional in North America spends 6.3 hours a day dealing with email. Does that not sound ridiculous to you? I mean, if you're getting 7 to 8 hours of quality sleep, this works out to like 1/3 of your day. 1/3 of your waking hours is spent dealing with email in one way, shape, or form. And just before you say, well, Scott, that's not me. I mean, that might be the average, but there's no way I'm spending that much time with email. Remember, this is more than just writing email. This is more than just reading email. Think of how often you take out your smartphone and just browse, right? You just open and you just scroll. How often do you open up your email client on your computer and just browse through? How often are you distracted by those little notifications that appear, those desktop notifications that appear in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen? Or how about the badge app icons, the little red circles that appear on your smartphone or your mobile device that tempts you and prompts you to open up your email more frequently than you need to? How about managing email? How about, organizing your folders and dragging things here, there, and everywhere? It all adds up. And you might actually be a lot closer to this number than you may think. Some of you may, in fact, be even over this average of 6.3 hours a day. Well, I certainly don't want you spending this much time with email. I think you've got a lot more important things, a lot more other areas that you want to be focused on and that you should be focused on. So I want to introduce you to an app that can make email so much easier, something that I've been using for over a year now. And I honestly don't think I could go back to dealing with my email or processing my email without using it. The application is called Boomerang, and the reason is I think they've named it very appropriately. If you're familiar with a traditional boomerang, if you throw it properly, it's going to come back to you, right? It's going to come back to its original destination, where it was originally thrown from. Well, Boomerang can do the exact same thing. You can say, you know what, I don't want to deal with this email right now. Can you bring it back to me at a better time? Some of you may be familiar with the application Inbox by Gmail, which does something very similar. In fact, it does really the exact same thing, is allowing you to bring back emails to your inbox at a more appropriate time. But Boomerang actually does so much more. That's just one of the features of Boomerang. You a screenshot of an email that I'm crafting to someone, and it has to do with a question or a request. And I want you to think for a moment of how often in a typical day are you asking a question or making a request of someone else via email? It's probably a lot, isn't it? So what do? You ask that question, you need an answer to it. Do you send a copy of it to yourself And does that end up in a special folder that you can go and review? Do you put a special flag on that sent email, which again, you're going to have to go back and look and review manually from time to time to see if they've replied to it? Do you drag it to a special folder? Do you use your calendar? Do you perhaps set a reminder, 2 days in the future to say, well, follow up with Jane if I haven't heard back from this question. All these manual steps to follow up on emails, some of them quite important, right? You need an answer and you want an answer by a particular time. Well, what Boomerang does is it gives you some additional features allowing you to track that email and to have it return to your inbox if and only if the recipient does not reply. If you look in the lower portion of my screen, you will see that I have some additional functionality, and this is what Boomerang can do for you. It does not replace your existing email client. It's not a replacement for Gmail. It's not a replacement for Outlook, but it gives you some additional functionality. So here you see there's a red send later button. I could actually choose to send this email in the future if I like. But what I really want to focus on is the checkbox and the next few drop-down menus next to it. So if I decide to click that checkbox, here I'm asking a question, and I really want to know if this person can meet with me. Let's say this is next Thursday. I want to see if they can meet with me in about a week's time. So I check this box, and then I can select, well, when do I want this answer by? When do I need to know an answer? I'm going to say 4 days. I can set that to any time that I want, right? It can be a couple of minutes. It could be a couple of weeks, even a month if so desired. But I'm going to say 4 days. And then the last one is if no reply. So essentially it's saying, Boomerang this email back to me in 4 days if there is no reply. And what Boomerang is going to do is it's going to track this email. And if this person does not reply to me within 4 days, I'm going to have my original email reappear in my inbox. And that's going to be the trigger. That's going to be my notification that, oh, that's right. They still didn't get back to me. I need to follow up on this. Do I send another email? Do I pick up the phone this time? Now, if this person does reply to me within that time frame, if they do reply to me within 4 days, nothing else happens. I don't get a second email. I don't get anything additional in my inbox. Boomerang takes care of this for me. This has absolutely transformed the way I deal with follow-up email. When I'm asking a question, when I am making a request of someone else, I click that checkbox at the bottom. I determine the appropriate time frame. Sometimes it's a few hours, sometimes it's a few days. And if they do not reply to me, I don't need to look anywhere else. I don't need to look at a special folder. I don't need to look at my calendar. Boomerang will return that to me if they don't reply to that email. Now, there's some other benefits of Boomerang as well. As I showed you, you can schedule emails to or have an email return if the recipient does not reply. You can schedule emails to come back to you at a better time, and that is the functionality of you receive something right now and you say, well, I don't want to deal with that right now. Bring it back to me tomorrow morning, or bring it back to me in 2 hours. So Boomerang does have that functionality. And then, as I showed you briefly with the red send later button, you can actually send an email at a future time. And depending on who you are working with or how you work, maybe at what time of day you work, this can actually be quite an advantage. Think about if you have stayed up really late and maybe you're going through your email at 2 in the morning. You're just about to hit send when you say to yourself, I don't really want them to know that I'm reading and replying to them at 2 a.m. No problem. You can schedule it to be delivered at 9 a.m. or 7:30 or 10 a.m., whatever you desire. Another helpful case can be if you're dealing with someone in a different time zone and you want to make sure that they receive it during their working hours, or if you know someone well enough and you realize that, yeah, they get a lot of email in the mornings, I'm going to increase my chances that they see my message if I send this at 11 a.m. or 11:30 a.m. So a lot of different ways that you can use the scheduled email feature as a part of Boomerang. If you would like to learn more, you can go to boomeranggmail.com or boomerangoutlook.com. Those are the only two email clients which Boomerang is available for right now. Again, it is not a replacement for your existing email client. It's essentially giving you some superpowers or some additional features that you can use with either Gmail or with Outlook. So I hope that you get a chance to try it out, to see if it's a good fit for you, help you with some of your email woes. But I've got a few other questions for you when it pertains to email. So one of them would be, are you tired of spending so much time with email? Even if it's not quite 6.3 hours a day, is email a major source of stress as a part of your work life or perhaps even your personal life? Would you say that your inbox is driving you crazy? Does that ring true to you? Is that could you relate with a statement like that? Or how about this? Would you like to spend half as much time dealing with email? I've yet to find someone who has said no to that last one. And maybe you've said yes to all three in this particular scenario. Well, if you did say yes to any of these questions, you may be interested in the Own Your Inbox online course, a step-by-step plan to spending less time with email. Late last year, I created the Own Your Inbox course, and the reaction has been fantastic. This is a self-paced course that you can use to spend a great deal of less time in your inbox. I show you a step-by-step guide on how you can configure any email application, whether it's Gmail, whether it's Outlook, whether you use something like Yahoo, whether you use Apple Mail, how you can configure your email so you can spend a lot less time in your inbox and spend a lot more time on your most important work, your number one projects or your number one priorities. Now, if you would like to learn more about the Own Your Inbox course, if you'd like to actually start the course and see if it's right for you, you can watch the first two videos for free at the following link. I've just included a link here in the live chat window. You can get started absolutely for free by clicking that link at simpletivity.com/own your inbox. So again, if you are tired of spending most of your day, the majority of your day, or just too much of your day in your inbox, too much with email, I would encourage you to explore, take the Own Your Inbox course for a test drive. Well, I promised you that we would keep this under an hour, and it looks like I'm holding true to that. We've got about 6 or 7 minutes left before the top of the hour. I would love to turn this webcast back over to you, and if you have additional questions and comments that you'd like to share, I'm happy to stay on the line for until the either questions run out or until we get to the top of the hour and answer as many as possible. Perhaps while I'm waiting for you to enter your questions, I'll go back and see if there's anything that I've missed from earlier today. Kirsten says, I'm using Wunderlist and Trello, but I definitely am mismatching tasks with notes. And again, it's a bit of an art and science, the combination of of notes and tasks. I think the important thing is that we want to get away from the mindset that everything that pops into our head or that everything that we jot down we need to pursue, right? Just because it's a good idea, it might be a very decent or a very positive idea, it doesn't necessarily mean that you should be pursuing it right now. You may want to write it in a task format, right? You may want to add an action verb so it's ready to go, but sometimes we want to keep that in a separate place. So, Kirsten, you're certainly not the only one that deals with that. Brian says, "Holy cow, that's a huge number Personally, I hate email. It is a huge number, isn't it? I mean, I think it surprises a lot of people. 6.3 hours, the average amount of time spent in our inbox. Brian, I'd love to hear if you've got some other ways. I know, there's a number of people who are using alternative methods to email, trying to reduce the amount of email that they take on. In fact, just this week, I had a article published on the Trello blog all about the inbox zero strategy, clarifying what inbox zero is, but also making some suggestions of other tools, other things that you could be using to be more effective with your communication. You may be interested in reviewing that article just this week on the Trello blog. Martin says, "Why you not make from a mail a task?" I believe your question, Martin, is about converting an email to a task, which certainly can be an efficient way of transferring that information over. So Outlook makes this very, very easy to convert an email message to a to-do or to a task. So if you can find those tools or find ways to do that, yes, that can certainly make that transition very helpful. And many note applications, whether it's something like Evernote or if you use something like Trello, also have the capability that you can email that information directly to them, right? So if you'd like that email to be converted into a note in Evernote, that's very simple to do. If you'd like that email to be converted to a card in Trello, that's very easy to set up as well. So you may want to look for those opportunities as a part of your work as well. Brian says, "For work, 90% of our communication happens in Asana." In quotes, "If it's not in Asana, it doesn't exist. Email is only for external communication." And that can be in a very effective way of doing things for an internal team, right? When you're working with your direct reports, when you're working with your colleagues on the same projects, Asana, Trello, Slack can be another way of keeping a conversation focused. Keep that focused on particular projects, right? It's not just about keeping the conversation internally or within sort of an internal application, but also keeping those conversations specific to projects or tasks that you're managing in Asana. And maybe the last thing that Brian comments on there is, email is only for external communication. It really doesn't look like we're going to be getting away from email anytime soon, right? I mean, that's still the standard way that we often reach out or make first contact with our clients, or they make contact with us, is having an email address. So we need to have some type of system, some type of way of dealing with it. But it sounds like, Brian, you've got a nice mix there of keeping your communication nice and focused there, and keeping email just for external communication. Well, I want to thank all of you for your attendance today. I want to thank you for your participation, all the great questions and all the great comments as a part of today's webcast. One last time, I'd encourage you, if you are sick of dealing with email, if you are up to your eyeballs with new messages and would like a better way, I would encourage you to try out or test out the Own Your Inbox online course. I have provided the link here. I'll provide it in the description below as well, if you would like to take this course for a test drive. Thank you again for your participation, and remember, being productive does not need to be difficult. In fact, it's very simple.